Today we're going to talk about equation solving a single equation, as well as just some general problem solving techniques. Most people tend to not enjoy word problems, and I think in general that's because problem solving techniques are themselves hard for people. So I think if you can make sense of these problem solving techniques, it'll be good for you. It'll be particularly useful for you for the rest of the course. So the goal for today is that you'll be able to solve equations using the basic number facts that we've been going over up to this point. So let's talk first of all about what we mean when we say solve an equation or a solution to an equation. A solution to an equation is the replacement that makes the equation true. So I've given you an example here. 3 times x plus 6 is equal to 12. And so in this example, x is a variable or an unknown, and we want to know what replacement for x will make this a true statement. So the answer is when x is equal to 2. So if I replace 2 in for x, I get a true statement. So 2 going in for x gives me 3 times 2 plus 6, and that is indeed equal to 12. So this is a valid equation. It's a true statement. I've got 12 equals 12. And so therefore I have a solution, namely the solution is x equals to 2. So this is what it means to solve an equation when somebody says they're solving an equation. So what is the sort of mathematical process behind the algebra going on here? And what's really going on is we have what are called equivalent equations. So we will say that two equations are equivalent if their solutions are the same. And equivalent equations give us the ability to solve problems, basically to solve these sorts of equations. So we want two solutions that are the same. Well, one thing that I could do in order to have an equivalent equation would be to subtract off 6 from both sides. By subtracting 6 from both sides, I've made it equivalent because I have done the same thing to both sides of the equation, and that will lead me to a result, namely 3x plus 6 minus 6 equals 12 minus 6. Some real basic simplification, right? My 6's are going to cancel, and I'm left with 12 minus 6, which is just going to be equal to 6, and I'm left with 3x equals 6. Okay, again, these are all equivalent equations. In other words, the first equation is equivalent to the second equation is equivalent to the third equation. These are all equivalent. Well, from here, I could divide both sides by 3. And that leaves me with 3 times x over 3 equals 6 divided by 3. If I simplify that out, I'm left with x equals 2. Remember, the whole point of this, the central idea is that every single one of these equations is equivalent. So in every case, I have equivalent equations. All right, I want to talk just briefly on problem solving. So I've got 5 steps here for you whenever you're solving problems. And the first step I've got repeated 3 times. Read, read, read. A lot of times, what I've noticed when people struggle with problem solving is that they haven't read the problem. And what does it mean to read the problem? It means to slow down and to take your time to make sure you understand everything being said in the problem. A lot of times, it's helpful to actually read the problem out loud. And so on your homework, on your quizzes, even on tests, I would encourage you as you're sitting, especially if you're taking the test in somewhere where you're by yourself, read the problem out loud yourself. Even reading it out loud can make a big difference. Second, you want to represent unknowns. So in the previous problems, we had x being a variable or an unknown. Use letters to represent unknowns. Once you've chosen what letters to represent your unknowns, then you want to translate the problem into an actual equation. After you've translated into an equation, you can simplify your equations. And then the final step that oftentimes people forget is to actually double check your work. Make sure that your answers are reasonable. If you follow these steps, these at least get you started on problem solving. I think problem solving is something that takes time to learn. You have to practice it. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. But it's not something that you can just expect to pull out at any point. It's something that you have to work at, and it takes time to develop the skills to be good at solving problems. I do want to do just one more sort of example, just by way of writing something out here for you to think about so that you've got an example to work on. So let's imagine that we are told that 3 times a number plus 2 is another number. So 3 times a number plus 2 is, shall we say, 8? How can we solve this? Well, the first thing, remember our steps, the first step is to read it. So 3 times a number plus 2 is 8. Then we need to represent the unknowns. What are the unknowns in this problem? The unknown in this problem is a number. So I'm going to represent my unknown, a number, with the letter x. Finally, I want to translate the problem into an equation. So I have 3 times a number. So let's do 3 times a number plus 2 equals 8, or is 8. Is and equals are sort of synonymous, so we're going to go ahead and write equals 8. Then we simplify equations. I'm going to go ahead and do this step by step. So I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. So I'm left with 3x equals 6. I'm going to divide both sides by 3. So let's see, divide by 3, divide by 3. So I'm left with x equals 2. And so my answer is x equals 2. Now I want to verify my answer. So what can I do? I can check 3 times 2 plus 2 is 8. 3 times 2 is going to be 6 plus 2 is equal to 8. So I verified my answer. If you follow through these steps, this is a basic outline of how to solve word problems. It'll get you a good way along the path